Today we're diving into a case from a city resting in the Thompson Valley of British Columbia, when a young woman would get on her bike to meet up with an ex-boyfriend, but would never arrive. Many people would raise suspicions as to who could have taken the young woman, but the prime suspect would be nothing short of a monster.
No answers.
9 years ago today.
What happened to these two young children?
Remains a mystery.
Urgent story unfolding right now. Who is missing? An unsolved murder.
"20-year-old Sherri Tanya McLaughlin was born August 30th of 1973 to her mother Jackie, a dry cleaner, and her father Gary, who was an RCMP officer. She also had an older brother named James. Her father was stationed in Kamloops, British Columbia during her childhood, so she was raised in the beautiful city surrounded by mountains and outdoor activities. However, her parents would separate in the early 1980s. By the early 90s, Sherri was working as a waitress at a local Pizza Hut with goals of going back to school to take computer sciences. She also had a 1-year-old son named Stephen. A woman named Caroline Johnson would recall when Sherri told her she was pregnant, saying, quote, "I remember the day she told me she was pregnant. I was at the bus stop on Parkcrest, and she was on her bike riding, and she stopped to tell me the news. I asked her where she was going to put this baby as she was such a tiny person, and we laughed. I can't believe he's 15 years old now, and I hope one day he will know how special she is." End quote. Sherri was a girl that was said to have no enemies, but did have bad relationships with past boyfriends. She was a young woman that liked to dance at nightclubs, shop for clothing, and hit the gym. She also was outgoing and had a lot of good friends. On September 18th of 1993, Sherri spoke to her mother on the phone and told her that she had a cold. Jackie told her to take some aspirin, drink some orange juice, and tuck herself into bed. Despite her cold, a few hours later, which was now September 19th, Sherri went out to a nightclub with her friends in Kamloops until around 1:45 a.m. She was later dropped off at home by a girlfriend. Around 2:30 a.m., Sherri would call her 19-year-old ex-boyfriend, Shane Gowans, asking if she could go over and talk to him. The two had previously lived together, but had split up earlier that month, but still remained good friends. During their conversation, another one of Sherri's ex-boyfriends actually tried to call her, and so she would put Shane on pause and started talking to 21-year-old John Herman. It would be around 3 a.m. that Sherri would decide to bike from her basement apartment on Schubert Drive to Shane's home. This was a ride she had done many times before, and it would have only taken her around 10 minutes. So when Sherri didn't arrive, Shane went looking for her, walking the route that she would have taken. Along Parkcrest Avenue, Shane would discover Sherri's 18-speed Rayleigh mountain bike abandoned along with her backpack, and after finding these items, he would report her missing. The spot was described as a road with an empty lot on one side and the railway tracks on the other. The bike's front wheel had been damaged beyond use, and then appeared to have been on the ground when it was run over and dragged a short distance by a slow-moving vehicle. Other than those items, there was no sign of a struggle or any physical evidence such as blood or torn clothing that would suggest that Sherri was hit. Sherri's mother Jackie would be in the process of moving from Creston to Victoria when the news came in. So her, along with Sherri's 17-month-old son and her grandmother Annette, would rush to Kamloops. Her brother James had taken a fare to Ashcroft and been out of cell phone range. When he had got back into town, his phone was crammed with messages from the RCMP and worried family members, asking if he'd seen his sister. On Sherri's bike, paint chips would be discovered, and a deer whistle would also be found at the scene, along with her backpack. And then a Crime Stoppers tip would eventually lead authorities to impounding a blue Pontiac Grand Am of a known sex offender, a witness placing the man in Kamloops around the time of Sherri's disappearance. The paint chips found on Sherri's bike would actually match the impounded vehicle, as well as that whistle would be connected to the vehicle. The back window of the vehicle had also recently been repaired, and then afterwards the ownership was transferred to the suspect's wife. Sherri was known to be a feisty young woman, and everyone believed she would have struggled for her life. So could she have been the one to break that back window? Or could something during her abduction broken the window? Authorities would also appear at the suspect's home, but would not reveal which city he lived in, but did note that their search turned up no evidence. Items seized from the suspect's vehicle were also taken and swabbed for DNA, but those results were also inconclusive. authorities stating that criminal charges could not be approved unless police got evidence that could put the suspect behind the wheel when Sherri was taken. But the vehicle didn't belong to either of Sherri's ex-boyfriends that had spoken to her on the night she disappeared. Both were polygraphed and later not considered suspects. Their friends also agreed that Shane would never have hurt her. So the big question remained, who was this mystery man? In 2009, Staff Sergeant Gary Kerr would tell the assembled media, along with Sherri's family, that he believed he knew who was behind Sherri's disappearance, telling the public, quote, "You know who you are. I know who you are. What I'm asking is if there is any grain of humanity in you, and I know there is, please do the right thing and tell someone." End quote. Sherri's now 17-year-old son would also appeal to the public for answers, barely speaking above a whisper as he said, quote, "We really want my mom back. I never got to know her. I was only about 1 when she went missing. I have no memory of her. I don't even know the sound of her voice. Please tell anyone. It doesn't matter who. Just tell somebody." End quote. It would turn out that back in 2009, authorities were only an inch shy of a mile from laying charges on an individual named Daniel Dow, who remained behind bars on separate charges, and who had a lengthy history of violence against women and teenage girls. It would turn out that on July 5th of 1977, a then 18-year-old Daniel would knock on the door of an 18-year-old woman's home in Prince George, British Columbia. He was asking to use her phone, but instead, he would essay her. He would later tell police that the night of the attack of the 18-year-old woman, he had been drinking to excess, and so he had decided to drive around rather than go home and face his wife's wrath. Because not only was he going around essaying young women, he was married. Less than 2 months later, Daniel once again tried the same thing in Prince George, but this time, the woman pulled out a knife, and he ended up actually fleeing. Later that night, he knocked on the door of a 16-year-old girl with the pretext that he knew a neighbor, and he once again essayed this teenage girl. After this, Daniel was sentenced to an 8-year prison term, 3 years for essaying the 18-year-old girl, and 5 years consecutive for the essay of the 16-year-old. After serving that sentence, he was then released on parole on May 26th of 1981. But the very next day, he essayed an acquaintance. Like, seriously, the Canadian justice system is ridiculous. This man was a repeat violent offender, and he was just continuously allowed to be re-released into the public to attack more women. It seriously makes me mad sometimes when I'm researching these cases because it's just so blatant. How many women does it take to be violently attacked and essayed for the justice system to actually do something to stop these predators? How many times is it going to take to realize that these individuals aren't going to change? 5, 10, 100? How many victims? During the time of Sherri's disappearance, Daniel had just been released on parole about a year prior and was living in the Lower Mainland. And the day she vanished, he was in Kamloops visiting family. It is thought that he may have hit Sherri with his car while she was riding her bike so that he could abduct her. It's then thought he drove to Hope, British Columbia, which was around 2 hours south towards Vancouver. He would have killed her somewhere along the way. And that's such a vast amount of land, that 2-hour drive, that he could have put her anywhere. It makes me wonder if this is a similar situation as the previous case we talked about in Texas, where a man hit a young woman riding her bike in the middle of the night and then basically offered her help, and instead he abducted her. But it wouldn't end there. 3 years after Sherri disappeared on March 30th of 1996, Daniel once again broke into the home of a woman in Campbell River, armed with a knife. The woman was in the process of putting her 1-year-old baby to sleep when Daniel snuck up on her. When he pointed the knife towards her throat, she instinctively put her hand out, which caused one of her fingers to be seriously sliced. When he wasn't able to find any money in her home other than some coins in a piggy bank, he threatened to kill the woman and her baby. And once he had the woman inside of his van, he choked her unconscious twice and hit her in the face, causing her nose to break. Miraculously, she would manage to escape his van after he let go of her throat. And during his testimony, Daniel would say, quote, "I was drunk enough and desperate enough that I just felt like, I could phone somebody and, they'd give me like $1,000 and I could drop her off and, that would be the end of it." End quote. So he essentially thought that holding this woman for ransom will get him $1,000. It's absolutely ridiculous. Once again, this man has a history of being a violent alcoholic who goes around essaying women and attacking them while he drinks. On top of that, he's also drunk driving the entire time. And what do you think he got for attacking this woman and her baby? And I'm sure causing her a lifetime of trauma. Thankfully, she escaped, but what would have happened to her if she didn't? For this crime, Daniel only received concurrent sentences of 3 years, 4 years, and 5 years. And it wouldn't be until after this attack that the Crown would finally apply to have Daniel declared as a violent offender. It took him that long, that many women, and possibly a murder for him to be declared a violent offender. It's ridiculous. And I know there's other cases in British Columbia that we've talked about as well, especially involving more at-risk individuals where there was a violent offender floating around that has now passed, thankfully, so he can't hurt any other women. But this is a reoccurring thing, it seems, in British Columbia, and I'm sure many other places in Canada and North America where there are these individuals that are continuously let out to just reoffend over and over and over again. It makes you wonder, how many times is too many? Does it have to be my sister, your aunt, your grandmother, your mother, your daughter, your friend, your cousin? How many of them have to be attacked for these individuals to actually finally be locked up for good? Despite the suspicion and the evidence that we've already talked about tonight that Daniel could be involved in Sherri's disappearance, nothing has ever been done decades later. Sergeant Kerr said he still has Sherri's case on his mind even long after retirement, saying it's like a hole in his gut. Despite the thousands of man-hours, 250 tips, and uncountable number of resources that were dedicated to finding Sherri, authorities have said that the case never really got going due to a lack of hard evidence. Which is really strange to me because they literally had his vehicle matching the paint chips that were found on her bike. There was also that whistle that was found on the scene that somehow matched his car. And then there's also a witness that placed him in the area. So I don't know how they don't have enough, but apparently there's not enough hard evidence, it seems, like blood, fingerprints, anything like that. But unfortunately, Daniel wasn't the only suspicious and dangerous person in the area during that time. During 1993, a stalker was suspected in the areas of Kamloops, Kelowna, and New Westminster within 18 months. That year, a 20-year-old woman would be attacked while walking her dog, just 600 feet from the spot where Sherri was abducted. As the woman was walking, she saw a man in a hooded kangaroo jacket and jogging pants under a rail overpass. As they passed, he grabbed her around the face and mouth, and she began trying to fight him off, which caused her to fall down and him to fall on top of her. Now, thankfully, her dog ended up attacking her attacker, and so the man eventually fled. Her dog saved her life that night. Meanwhile, in Kelowna, 19-year-old Jennifer Cusworth went to a nightclub and then a party before leaving home on foot in the middle of the night of October 16, 1993. Her body would sadly be found in a ditch the following day. Police were looking for a man with dirty blonde to medium brown hair who followed a different woman just hours before Jennifer was murdered. Meanwhile, on March 20th of 1992, 24-year-old Crystalyn Davis would last be seen leaving the California Dreaming nightclub in New Westminster around 2:15 a.m. She was last seen with a man who had dirty blonde shoulder-length hair. 5 days later, she would be discovered dead inside of her apartment. So could it have been Daniel? Could it have been the man with the dirty blonde hair? It's very unclear, but what we do know is that there was a lot of predators lurking around the area. But for when it seems like the man with the dirty blonde hair liked to wander on foot when he attacked his victims, whereas Daniel had a vehicle. In 2013, Sherri's mother Jackie spoke to the media about her own struggles regarding her daughter's disappearance, saying she had a light burning by her photo until she was found. Jackie goes by the area on Parkcrest where Sherri was abducted every anniversary to leave flowers. And during a press conference with Stephen, he was captured comforting her as she sobbed. After his mother's disappearance, his grandma Jackie got legal guardianship of him. From a The Province article in 1994, a year after Sherri vanished, Jackie said, quote, "I feel very alone. I hold her picture and tell her I won't give up, and I'll find her. We love her. I try to go through all the faces, all the people she'd known and I've known, and try to ask, why? Who would have done this and why? And then I realize there's some sick people out there. I get to the point where I'm afraid to call my son. I know it upsets him, and I don't want him to know I'm hurting." End quote. In recent years, Sherri's brother James has also spoken about his own depression and coming to terms with possibly never receiving closure. James saying, quote, "After 30 years of having to live through this, you would think I would be able to explain how I feel. But every year that goes by becomes harder and more complicated to explain. I don't know myself any longer. I don't know how to act around people. The simple question that people ask me, 'How are you?' is a trick question to me. Well, do you want me to answer honestly, or is this a made-up automatic response that means absolutely nothing? One of the things that hurts me the most was we never had the chance to grow up together as adults. It's a matter that realizing I'm not getting the support I should from a government entity. They claim they know where this guy is, what prison he's sitting in, but they fail to make any attempt to question this guy and get real answers. Maybe my nephew will find out what happened to his mother before he dies." End quote. That's really hard to hear the brother of a missing loved one say that he doesn't believe that he's going to get the answers, but he hopes that their child does. This family deserves to know what happened to Sherri, yet those that hold the answers are not speaking. As of 2021, it had been over a year since James had heard from the authorities regarding his sister's case. He said he continuously attempted to contact them, asking someone at Serious Crimes to call him back, yet he received no calls. Then, one day, an RCMP officer came knocking on James's door asking for his doorbell footage for an unrelated murder case. So he then asked the officer why he should help him out and give him this footage if he had been ignored for years. After this, a new officer in charge of the Serious Crimes Unit would finally contact James and admitted that they didn't know anything about the case and so they'd get back to him. Later, they would tell James that they were planning to, but were unable to go question Daniel because the Coquihalla Highway was closed. That was in November of 2021. James was then assigned a liaison officer who was also unfamiliar with Sherri's case. James saying that it was clear that they were all just working for a paycheck and it was like speaking to a janitor when it came to asking questions. However, one thing that did stand out was that Sherri's case was no longer being spoken about as a missing persons case, but instead a murder case.
It's been more than 3 decades since a young woman disappeared in Kamloops. 20-year-old Sherri McLaughlin vanished while riding her bike to her boyfriend's house in the early hours of September 19, 1993. Her mangled bike and backpack were found on the side of the road, but no trace of Sherri has ever been found. Police have not named a suspect, but Sherri's family believes the person responsible is dangerous offender Daniel Dow, who remains behind bars on unrelated charges.
They claim they know where this guy is, what prison he's sitting in. They know where he is, but they failed to make an attempt to question this guy and get any real answers.
Sherri's brother James has called for justice reform so no other family has to endure the pain they have suffered for 30 years.
It wouldn't be until 2 years later, in 2023, that James would finally announce that the RCMP had finally questioned Daniel. However, they didn't get any answers from him. And that's honestly all the information that there is to Sherri's case. A memorial would be set up in Sherri's honor at the site where her bike was found, a cross and a wreath were placed, and money gathered for it. A more permanent memorial would later be created as well. But it's 2025 now. It's 2 years since Daniel was last questioned, and I'm still sitting here saying that Sherri's case has not been solved. So if you know anything, please say something. Please give this family closure. As James said, he feels like he's not going to get the answers, and he's hoping that at least Sherri's son does. I honestly hope he gets the answers as well. Sherri's son never got to know the sound of her voice, and that is because someone took that away from him and their family. And that person could still be walking our streets. Sherri is described as a Caucasian woman standing 5'6" tall and weighing around 110 pounds. She has brown eyes and light brown hair with blonde highlights cut just above the shoulders. At the time of her disappearance, she is believed to be wearing dark green jeans, a gray sweatshirt, and running shoes. My heart goes out to Sherri's family. I truly hope answers come. And if you know something, please say something. I'll have the information in the description bar to contact the authorities. And as always, I hope you all stay safe out there, lock you in indoors, and I hope to see you in the next video.